the theory of evolution is really the fact of evolution, and it would be a lot less confusing if scientists were less pernickety and actually used the word fact in the everyday sense that everybody would then understand. Evolution is a fact. We are cousins of chimpanzees. We are descended from animals that would have been described as fish if we'd seen them today.
Do you think that there's any one particular piece of evidence, if you see if that will change people's minds about creationism?
I wouldn't expect their minds to be changed by fossils, really. I think the more convincing evidence probably is the evidence from comparison of modern animals, because we have plants, because we have so many different species, and by comparing them with each other, particularly comparing the molecular genetics, which is nowadays very easily done because all living creatures have the same genetic code. So you have an exact digital count of the similarities between every species and every other species. And if you look at that pattern of similarities, it falls perfectly into a hierarchical tree. It's a family tree. And even better than that, everything you look at, every different gene you look at, gives you the same family tree. That's remarkably persuasive evidence to anybody who attends to it for long enough to understand it.
As you point out in the book, over 40% of Americans believe in creationism, which is a higher number than in many other Western countries, if you take Sweden, for example. Why do you think that creationism has such a strong foothold in the United States compared to these other Western countries?
It's not really up to me to say why the United States and Turkey should be way out ahead or behind in this particular case. It does seem to be the case that of all advanced Western nations, the United States is more religious than any other, and I guess it reduces to that question. There does seem to be evidence of a divide in the United States between two cultures, and it does seem to be a deeper divide and maybe even widening. But perhaps we don't see that in European countries. There seems to be a divide between, what shall we say, the Sarah Palin voters and the Barack Obama voters, who seem to be more bitterly split than the corresponding divides in other countries.
Who did you have in mind as a reader for the book when you wrote it? Because it seems like it may be difficult for a creationist to read this book without seeming a little bit insulted.
I'm not really aiming it at a dyed-in-the-wool creationist. I don't think they really read books anyway, except one book. So no, it's aimed at the intelligent layperson who does read books and who vaguely knows a little bit about evolution and vaguely knows that there are creationists and maybe even vaguely thinks that he's a creationist himself, but who is curious and wants to know the evidence.
In the past few years, obviously, with the God delusion, you've become, in some ways, sort of an evangelist for the atheist movement and for defending Darwinism, certainly, but then also a certain kind of anti-religiousness. How have you dealt with becoming, in some ways, a more polarizing figure?
I like to think the God delusion is a humorous book. I think actually it's full of laughs, and people who describe it as a polarizing book or as an aggressive book, I suspect very often they haven't read it, but they've read other people reacting to it. That has put out the idea that the God delusion is an aggressive book, and you've heard words like strident and shrill.
Do you regret having that kind of reputation? And do you feel like it's handicapping you in the future that you'll always be seen as having a certain kind of agenda in mind?
Yes, I mean, I think it's unfortunate. I think it's actually resulting, as I say, from people who haven't actually read the book or who haven't actually met me personally, and so I'm described as a very aggressive, strident person, which I'm not. It would be nice if more scientists realize what I think amounts to a kind of responsibility almost to go out there and explain what it is that they do in entertaining and interesting ways. It is so wonderful that here we are on this planet and we now understand why we're here. And it's just a sort of ecstatic feeling to understand why you exist. And I want to share that feeling with other people.